Round of applause. Superb.
To the right.
Yes.
Okay, that's me. Far too many wrinkles on that photo. Note to self, change it. To the right. There we go. Like Alex. Yeah, that's me, the little dude in the blue suit. I also did my own tandem skydive. I actually didn't read the small print. It wasn't until I was sat on the edge of the plane that I realised I was going to be free falling for 6,000 feet with no parachute. And I'm like going over the edge there, I'm going, what the actual? But I did that because, for me, my fear of heights at that time was my last remaining barrier to being fearless. It's a bit of an ask when you run a company called Fear Less and Live More, for people to actually think you are genuinely not scared of anything. You know, I don't like spiders, but I don't run away from them. I just like, no. We all have fears that we're, limited by. I was never limited by fear of heights. It was just one of a series of negative self-limiting beliefs that became part of the story that I told myself, which for far too long kept me rooted exactly where I said I didn't want to be. Halfway down the 6,000 foot without parachute, because there was another 10,000 feet after that with the chute, I suddenly realised that actually I'd never ever been afraid of heights. Because until that parachute opened, I was hurtling towards the ground at 120 miles a second thinking, oh my God, I'm going to die. Literally. Yeah? I'd always been scared of hitting the ground and going splat, i.e. ending my life. But once that chute went up, I was like, I could have stayed there forever. You can't tell from this, but that guy's 14 inches taller than me. Serious mismatch. When we landed, he's screaming, get up your feet, get your feet up, get your feet up. And I said, I can't. And he's going, yes you can, you did it, that's how you pass. If you lift your legs up, then the instructor can glide you safely in. They forgot to, they gave me somebody that was 14 inches tall, for Christ's sake. I was that small that he had to strap me in that tight. I actually could not bend my body to get to my leg. I couldn't even reach my own legs. His feet hit the floor first, which caused us to tumble, which caused the first ever full finger landing on fingertips. Both hands landing on fingertips. I've never felt pain as much. Fortunately, I don't know how I didn't break anything, but that just compounded the fact for me that actually I'd never been scared of heights. We labour under the misapprehension that the stories we tell ourselves are the truth. You would not lie to your own best friends, any of you, I'm sure. But if you're not where you say you want to be today, and you've been saying that for a very long time, something's not right. There's a mismatch somewhere in the story that you're telling yourself. Does that make sense? The stories we tell ourselves that we believe to be true, Alex was saying our truth, there's our truth and then there's the actual truth when we're talking just about ourselves. The stories we tell ourselves, we come to believe that it's true because we repeat it so often. So for me, I'm scared of heights was just one of my mantras. Got me out of decorating for quite a long time, to be fair, because I didn't have to go up the step ladders. But the point is, everything, ladies and gents, everything begins and ends with us. We come into the world a blank canvas, all of us. As babies, we're born naked and penniless, and we're a blank canvas. We have no other agenda other than just to be. We're conscious, but we've not yet developed a consciousness. We don't know we've been born, we just know we're in a different environment. We are accepting of everything, and yet we expect nothing in return. We don't know about anything other than love. We come from a place of love, largely but not exclusively, to be fair, and as children, we grow up expecting to be loved, and as we grow, to love also. The word that's often missing in our lives is unconditionally. To love and be loved unconditionally is everybody's birthright. without exception. And yet far too many of us go through life not feeling that love, not knowing the security of a place where you don't feel anxious, stressed, lacking, worried. And yet we're not born that way. None of us are born scared. Nobody ever. We're born, thanks to our genetic programming, we're born with the ability to be afraid. Massively different. The ability to do something is completely different from having to do it. If you're able to do something but don't want to, or you want to do something but aren't able, same words, different scenarios. We're not born fearful. We're born with two innate abilities. The ability to be afraid of being startled and or falling, hence jumping out of an aeroplane. We are not born fearful. We're not. We come into this world, as I said, naked, penniless. We're going to go out this world in the same way with a few more wrinkles, but we're still going naked and penniless. It's what we do in between the day we arrive and the day we leave that counts. Fear comes on the back of memory. When we develop the ability of memory, we start to attach significance to instances in our childhood, in our life, in our relationships, whatever and wherever. If you've got an emotional reference to a point in time, a memory, you're going to want to repeat that because it's an emotional reference that's enjoyable, I should say. You're going to want to repeat it. That's how I took my first drink. Oh, I'm going to have some more of that next Friday night. If you've got an emotional pain point, you'll do anything not to repeat it. And the story that you start to tell yourself will make that better somehow. If it's a negative, self-limiting belief that you can't, /won't, /aren't able to overcome for whatever reasons, you will create a story to back up the story that you're telling yourself. And it will keep you rooted inside your very carefully crafted comfort zone, the place where you say you do not want to be, because the alternative is to stick your head above the parapet and be prepared to be seen to be vulnerable. Far too many people in 21st century life don't want to be seen to be vulnerable. They don't want to be seen to be less than perfect. They don't want to be seen as a failure or having made continual mistakes. They don't want change to happen in their lives. They do really, they don't know how to do it, because to be seen to be vulnerable implies all of the above, but more than anything, it indicates lack. A sense of, I'm not enough. I'm never good enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not clever enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not rich enough. Enough already, enough. I still have a dodgy haircut. I'm circa 4 years old there. Is that me or is that? Yeah, it is blurred. Okay. I'm not quite sure what's happening there. Dodgy haircut, painting sands, and I'm not going to tell you what I was doing in that hole. Everything started off okay. I went to school, class clown, that's me, poppy in my mouth. That's circa 1976, I'm about 16 there, 15, 16, and I am proud to say that most of the people in that photograph are still with us today. One of us sadly isn't, and that's something that for all of us that are left behind, we remember with great sadness from time to time, because one of our members got killed in a car crash about 18 months after we left school. That was my first knowledge, if you like, of somebody close to us, even though it was a friend, it was a family member, dying. And life is temporary. With the understanding that at 18 years old, your life can be snuffed out for no fault of your own, reinforces very strongly that life can be temporary. And it's something that I never actually forgot, even though I did get lost along the way. By the time I'm 30 years old or thereabouts, 27 I think there, I'm married happily, and we have a son, I have a mortgage, and I have a job, but I also have at least 2 nervous breakdowns under my belt. My story is such that, like most of us, I grew up in the 60s. It was a different world, and there is no blame attached to anything here, other than to say that I grew up with a lifelong battle against mental ill health. It was born on the back of my childhood. The story I told myself as I got older was everything that was happening to me was because of my mental ill health. My mental ill health was somebody else's fault. Ergo, I didn't have to take any responsibility for my story. The same story that I'm the one that's talking to myself about. As life progressed, that story became ingrained. Why? Because what we think about, we become to feel. If we think often enough, I'm thick, I'm not clever, I'm not rich, I'm ugly, whatever it is that you are telling yourself, or you've heard other people say about you, or about somebody else, when you repeat that mantra often enough, even if you only say it jokingly, what you're doing is signaling to your subconscious that actually is what you are. What we fail to understand is that by the time we're about 7, our world map, if you like, the view that we have of ourselves, has already been created for us. It's been created for us by our parents and our carers and our teachers, our responsible adults. And largely that will mirror their upbringing. We don't know what we don't know. None of us. We do not know what we do not know. And I have nothing but love and respect for anybody who is a parent. Because if you had 12 children, you'd need 12 different manuals to bring them all up successfully to their full potential, that being the potential that they would come to want for themselves as adults, not the potential that you want to see them fulfill. It's a different story. And yet by 7 years old, we're already playing to the tune that somebody else has been fiddling for 7 years. By fiddling, I mean, yeah? We have no control over that. But at a time in my life when I should have taken responsibility for the choices that I was making, it didn't. It didn't. Because nothing was my fault. I took my angry teen years into a resentful 20s. By the time I was a mother, like I said, I'd already had 2 nervous breakdowns. My first one came when I was 18 years old, and I went into my GP. I was 5 minutes in his office. I landed on the pavement with the script in my hand, and he said, "Take 2 of those twice a day. You'll be as right as ninepence in 6 weeks." That man was a god. He was an absolute bloody genius. I was as happy as Larry. I was also stoned. I just didn't know. Because what he'd given me were a prescription for 2 diazepam twice a day for 6 weeks. I was taking enough to knock a horse out. But what it did with me was ramp it up. I was so happy, it was unbelievable. He forgot the little nugget. At the end of 6 weeks, come back and we'll wean you off it. Boom! Detox, crash, burn. At that time, diazepam was the world's most prescribed tranquilizer. In America, they were eating it like Smarties. And nobody told me. So I hated doctors. It's doctor's fault now. I've moved on a bit. It's not her fault, it's doctor's fault. Not my fault. Not once did I think, oh, I need to go back and ask. So I had a little drink, as you do, on Friday night in Sheffield. What we believe to be our story is how we come to feel about ourselves. I think I'm stupid. I'm poor. I'm not clever. When we think about something often enough that we express it via our emotions, our feelings are just another word for emotions, guys. We start to act that way. We start to act it, and ultimately, we come to believe it. We believe the bullshit. We absolutely believe the bullshit. A good friend of ours, Stephen Doran, Stephen, this is a plug, mate. Stephen Doran wrote a book, Burn the Bullshit. If you've not read it, read it. It sums up everything perfectly. The point is, I believed my own bullshit for that long that ultimately it nearly killed me. And I say that not to be dramatic, it's a fact. My result was I believed everything that I had ever told myself. I was so rooted in a past that I could do nothing about, largely because it was a past for a start. Past is done, it's gone. Is it easy to draw a line under it, step over it, and walk forward without looking back? Hell no. Is it worth it? Hell yes. My inability, my unwillingness, and my reluctance to actually face up the reality of my life, which was I was becoming increasingly dependent on antidepressants and or alcohol, combinations, not good. But that's me. That's me, 2010. I remember coming out of my apartment, we were on a family holiday, and I remember coming out of my apartment that day and literally wobbling. Everything was wobbling, trust me. And as my grandkids tell me now, apparently it still does, there's just a lot less of me. I come from a family that are very honest, what can I say? I remember being ashamed of being that big. But I got bigger. And I got sicker. And to save his modesty, the bit of khaki that you can see there is our son, or part of him. That was the day he arrived back in RAF Bryce Norton. He'd just done a 6-month tour in Afghanistan, in real war zone, where five of his friends were killed. My already fragile mental health, done it. Done it completely. I promised him I'd be sober by the time he came back, and not only wasn't sober, I looked like someone out of the Adams Family. I was bright yellow. I was literally the same colour as Carol's banner. I was 6.5 stone heavier than I am now, and I was always this height. Always when I got to 18 I was. But I was 6.5 stone heavier. I was another one of me. Anyway, 9 stone now. So you can imagine the blubber, you can imagine the wobble. And still, I talk to myself along the lines of, this is not my fault. And I used to say things like, of course I've got a drink problem. I've got 1 gob, 2 hands. That's a hell of a problem. Or I drink, I get drunk, I fall down, no problem. Why? Because I thought it was funny? No. Because I thought, while I was putting it out there, I was never ever a secret drinker, incidentally, ever. But whilst I was putting it out there, then I'm taking it to my doubters, to my haters, and if I can say it, yours has no power, which is also true. Except in here, you're compounding all the bullshit you've been telling yourself forever. And at some point or other, in the preceding, that was 2010, I'm what, 40? 50. In the preceding 10, 20 years, I've come to believe the rubbish I was telling myself so deeply, numerous therapists made no difference. I have 4 complete, well-documented nervous breakdowns under my belt, and things were about to get a whole lot worse. September the 26th, 2012, I went to my GP, and I went there with the intention of getting some routine blood results. I very nearly didn't go that day, very nearly. And something inside me went, no, go on, get your ass around there, go. I sat down in front of her at 9:30 in the morning. She reached for the phone, picked it up, went like that. And like an idiot, I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm phoning for an ambulance. And like an even bigger idiot, I went, who for? Me and her in the room. Your liver's failing, you need to go to hospital, you need to go now. I didn't. I went home and I insisted on cleaning out the fridge. Seriously. I'm one of these people that clean up in case burglars break in so they don't find it untidy. I have OCD, it's part of my mental health conditions. I embrace my OCD these days, but on a really bad day, my house is so tidy it's unbelievable. Now I can talk about it like that because it's true. Then I needed to go home. She just told me I needed to go to hospital, my liver was failing, but I needed to go home, I needed to make sure the fridge was clean, I needed to make sure the bath was tidy and clean. all rationality gone. I was also as pissed as a fart. By that point, at 9:30 that day, I was already halfway down the second bottle of wine for the day. Because on the day I was admitted to hospital, I was drinking 5 bottles of wine per day, every day. In essence, I'd been drunk for 3 years. Never sober. Legally, never sober. I was a mess. I believed the story so much that I very nearly paid with my life. I was admitted to hospital that day. I sort of became aware of my surroundings 5 days later when the consultant came to me and said, "You've won the battle, but you've not won the war." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're dying." He was as blunt as that, when he wasn't as gentle as that. I remember looking at him and saying, "Excuse me?" And he said, "No, we can't do anything for you." I was peeing, I was toxic, it was horrible, but I was already detoxed at that point. My liver had gone, end-stage liver failure, my kidneys were on the way out, and I'm telling you this for no other reason than to help you to understand that whatever your story is, whatever your it is, we've all got an it. Mine just happened to be a double whammy of mental ill health and alcohol, because that fit my criteria. It fit my MO that would keep me safe inside a comfort zone that I didn't want to be inside, but I did not know how the hell to get out of it. He said, "You're dying. I would like to think that you're going home, but I can't guarantee it. As far as I'm concerned, this is it." And he left. I'm like, "Really?" I started crying. And I remember looking at my watch and saying, "I haven't got time." Paul said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I haven't got time." He went, "What?" I went, "I haven't got time. I haven't got any time left to do all the things that I wanted to do that I never did." I was 52 years old. I wanted to go to India. I wanted to throw myself out of a plane and survive. I wanted to do all sorts of manner of things that I can't remember now in the heat of this moment. But the point was, in that split second, I had clarity for the first time ever that I was an idiot and the story I was telling myself had to change. I didn't know if I was going to walk out of there. Clearly I declined the offer to die, but it took me 7 weeks. And I did walk out there on my own 2 feet, much to everybody's surprise. What happened on that day was bad enough. The doctor told me I was going to die. He arrived late to deliver the verdict after his rounds and etc. One of our daughters arrived early for visiting. Found both parents crying. She's seen me cry before, but never a dad. The fact of the matter is, she walked in, because it wasn't a secret why I was there. She walked in, she took one look at us crying. She was, I think she was 18. She said, what happened? And my husband had to tell her that Mum was dying. In that moment, our daughter let out the most guttural scream that I've ever heard. She held my gaze. It sent like forever. I'm sure it wasn't. But in that moment, you know that moment when it's polarized? And if you've heard, does anybody here know what I mean when I say paradigm shifts? When your world shifts on the axis, on its own axis, and you know in that instant that your life is never going to be the same again. Because in my daughter's eyes, I saw hatred. She hated me that day. She'd hated me for a long time, if I'm frank. She hated me, she was angry, she was scared. But in my daughter's eyes, I saw the love of another human being for me at a time when I couldn't even love myself. And in that split second, my why was born. If the why of the consultant's verdict hadn't been enough, that why, and she screamed and she left. And I remember saying to myself then, internally, I have got no clue if I'm going to walk out of here alive. But if I do, my life will change for the better forever. For me, certainly for my family. And somehow, intuitively, I knew I would pay it forward. I had no clue how. I had no clue. I had no plan. I had no business. I had no job. I had no money. But I knew that if I walked out, and I made a promise to myself then, and it's a promise that I kept. I turned 7 years old this coming September. I'm like the Queen. I'm actually nearly 60. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm 7 years old in September. Being reborn sounds evangelical. I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person. Having the ability to be able to stand here in front of you and say, today I am nearly 7, and today as it stands, I'm 2,410 days sober, keeps me going. Do I count my sobriety days every day? No. I don't need to now, because I've reprogrammed my story. My story has changed because I now take responsibility and hold myself accountable and have other people hold me accountable for what I say I'm going to do. I took responsibility for my life. More importantly, I took responsibility for my choices, and even more importantly, I took responsibility for the consequences. And the consequences were, I nearly died, and in the preceding years, I put my family through hell. My family are still in my life today. I'm still married to the same man I met when I was 17. We have 3 children between us. We have 5 grandchildren. And my life on many levels is complete. Am I perfect? Hell no. Do I aspire to be? No. Why don't I aspire to be perfect? Because that's part of what got me into trouble in the first place. Perfection, ladies and gents, I'm here to tell you, doesn't exist. But when you accept responsibility for the life that is yours and yours alone to live, then things start to change. Because then you understand the power of choice. You know if you make a poor choice, there are going to be consequences. And depending what that choice is, clearly consequences can be good or bad. Have I made any mistakes in the last 7 years? Hell yeah. Do I beat myself up about it now? No. I learn from them. How? Because I've spent the last 7 years essentially taking care of myself. The first step to personal transformation, regardless of what the transformation is, regardless of how desperate it might be in terms of actually living or losing weight or anything else, the importance of the transformation is paramount only if you are going to do it, and do it to a degree that you are going to hold yourself accountable and or be willing to have somebody else do that for you. If you don't trust yourself, find an accountability partner. Make sure that they bring you up. I have 2 friends, I have many friends. Most of the girls in that picture, we're all getting together very shortly for a girly weekend away. But I have 2 friends in my life, one particularly who hold me accountable for myself, not on social media. Quick text here and there, quick phone call here and there, are we all right, what are you up to, etc, etc, etc. And I would not lie to them anymore. But I made a career out of lying to them in the past, to the degree that they didn't know I'd been admitted to hospital because I put a blanket around it. Not anymore. Sanity is what I come to describe looking after ourselves. The self-limiting negative beliefs and behaviours we allow ourselves to entrench in our brains often comes at the expense of looking after ourselves. Women, definitely. Men, increasingly, but only because more of them are willing to admit it. Our mental health status in this country is getting worse by the day. child mental ill health is between 0 to 16 is critical issue level. I was a child with mental ill health problems for whatever reason. Part of what I do today is go in schools and teach children emotional intelligence and growth mindset and make them believe that they can fly. I have a keynote that's for education, which is the next time your child tells you he wants to be a Jedi warrior, go out and buy him a lightsaber, because next week he's going to want to be a vet. It doesn't matter. We mirror the beliefs of our children. We don't have them mirror our beliefs. We've got it on its head. We've got it arse upwards, to coin a Yorkshire phrase. Mirror the beliefs of your children, because trust me, it's far easier to raise a whole child than it is to mend a broken adult. Because the other strand of what I do these days, the kids, when I go into school, I class that as my preventative arm. The earlier we can get children to believe in themselves, the better chance they have of growing up to be well-adjusted, rounded adults. 0 to 16 critical issue levels in this country. By the time a child, any one of our young people, if you know somebody at 14 years old, if you knew 10 people at 14 years old, 5 of them will already have been to their doctor with an identifiable, recorded mental health episode. By the time that child is 24, that percentage is 75%. That's not my stats, that's the World Mental Health Organization stats. 75% of our young people, by the time they are 24, have a mental health condition. Now that's in various levels. Anxiety, all the way up. It doesn't matter. We start in childhood. The picture we have of ourselves at 7, we take that with us. Whether we realise it or not, we take it with us. And if we're fortunate, we have a really good story to live up to. Sanity, not vanity. It is not selfish to take care of yourself. It's sanity, not vanity. And for me, the first thing I did when I realised what an idiot I'd been was I wrote a letter to myself. I wrote a letter to myself apologising for what I didn't know I didn't know. None of us know what we don't know. Sanity, in my book now, means that I am sensible and accept that my needs are important, just as important as anybody else's, and I trust myself, I should say, but it doesn't fit, and I trust you will trust yourselves to understand that all of the above is true. If you are sensible enough to accept that your needs are important, as important as anybody else,